Thank you for staying with us. We continue here. South Africa is counting down to a grey list exit. Analysts say South Africa is likely to, or rather unlikely, to be removed from the Financial Action Task Force's grey list at its meeting in June. Now, this indicates that the FATF's October plenary meeting will be the earliest date for the country to be removed from the list. South African authorities must still fulfill a half-dozen action items, and these include demonstrating the country's ability to pursue complicated financial crimes and rapidly identify trust and company shareholders. South Africa was included to a grey list of nations that are not completely compliant with anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist financing criteria in February 2023 for the first time. Now, the Financial Action Task Force, a Paris-based monitor, made this judgment, placing South Africa among South Sudan, Haiti, Syria, as well as Yemen. Now, if South Africa exits the list in October, it would have taken 2 years and 8 months. The FAFT's next plenary will begin on the 17th of February next year in Paris. Now, chocolate prices are expected to rise due to record high cocoa prices, which are the key ingredient. Cocoa prices peaked in the third week of December, reaching an all-time high. Prices are up 180% since the start of this year. Now, this spike is attributed to supply difficulties as well as unfavorable weather in West Africa, which accounts for nearly 75% of worldwide cocoa production. The International Cocoa Organization reported the highest shortfall in over 6 decades for the 2023-2024 marketing year, citing crop failures in the world's top cocoa producers, that's the Ivory Coast as well as Ghana. High cocoa prices are expected to linger into next year. For South African consumers, this translates as high expenses for common indulgences like chocolate, coffee, with no immediate relief as yet. South African consumers are urged to be strategic when planning their finances for the new year. Now, consumers say affordability remains a tough balancing act due to the rising cost of living as well as debt management. Our business anchor, Tumisang Ndlovu, has this report.
Debt Rescue's festive season survey has revealed that inflation is still the primary driver behind spending behavior. Debt Rescue's Annelien van der Poel indicates that the interest rate also remains high despite 2 25 basis point cuts announced by the Reserve Bank in 2024.
The survey is telling us that consumers are becoming more and more aware of the impact of that, and that's a good thing. But realistically, in the bigger scheme, if we look at the whole of what South Africans are facing, we know that, like you said, it's not just this year. This year's been obviously we've seen a bit of relief in the form of the interest rate hikes reductions, but they've not been as significant that they really make much of a change to our budgets and how we spend. So for most consumers, unfortunately, the reality is we're still sitting with the after effect of the impact of high inflation and what it's done to the cost of living for us. We're still sitting with, it's still very high interest rates. So our debt is still very, very expensive. So for us as consumers, and for many out there, what it realistically means is that there just isn't money going around, there isn't money available. And like I said, from our other surveys we've seen, consumers are literally having to, 5 days after payday, they don't have funds available and they are living for the balance of that month on credit. And we know that this typically, we're heading towards what's now commonly known as January, where it's for many people 6 weeks between the last payday and the next. And they've got to make a normal salary stretch over a longer period of time with the pressures of the festive season and getting together and expenses, etc. So consumers are changing their behavior. They're becoming more aware, but I'm not sure if this is going to be enough of a change to give them the relief that they so desperately need.
The survey highlights that this year's holiday period saw consumers exercise prudence. That's as 68% chose to stay home for the holidays, while 71% said they would not be able to afford gifts for loved ones. Van der Poel explains that a gradual change in consumer spending behavior has been noted.
We've been seeing this over the last couple of years, how the dynamics and the spending habits have changed. And this survey has probably been the one with the biggest and most dramatic outcome, which is exactly as you've said. We've seen a very big change in behavior in terms of travel and in gifting especially, and it's completely to blame on consumer budgets not being able to afford these things anymore. And it's not great for the economy either, because ultimately we want an economy where consumers have the funds to be able to spend and drive the economy and grow it, etc. But not at the cost of debt that's unaffordable. And unfortunately for many consumers, what that means is they have to, we've been monitoring various trends, and they have to quite literally make a decision between putting food on the table and gifting. And for many consumers, it's just becoming the situation where they realize that if they had to gift, it would probably mean they'd have to cut somewhere else in their budget, and very likely it would come at the cost of putting food on the table. So consumers are rather, changing their habits now and saying we're focusing on the more important things and trying to avoid unnecessary debt where they're trying.
Van der Poel says this behavior reflects a shift to heightened financial caution.
I think there's still a lot of social pressure. I think there's still a lot of, situations where people don't want others to know how difficult it is for them financially, and that there's still, I guess, to a degree of maybe shame or guilt attached to not being able to afford it. But, I think this is where we've got to look at the statistics and look at what the reports are telling us. And that's that almost 40% of credit active consumers are struggling financially. They've got impaired credit records. So it means that they are struggling. And we've got to change our mindset where we be a bit more open and just say, listen, I can't afford this. And I think we'd be very surprised when we start speaking that way, that we'll realize that the other people might reciprocate and say, you know what, I'm in agreement with you. Let's change some of our habits. Let's maybe not have this, put the burden on everybody, or on one person, and everybody comes in and eats at their house, and, bring and share, or Secret Santa as opposed to buying for everybody. I think it's just a question of us having to be honest and say, listen, guys, it's tough out there. My budget's it's stretched to the maximum. Can we make some changes to the way we do things?
The report also indicates that participants would rather use cash to purchase goods in a high interest rate environment where debt becomes more expensive. For Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405, I'm Tumisang Ndlovu.
To news further afield now, New York City, also known as the Big Apple, is one of the most iconic and vibrant cities in the world. With its towering skyscrapers, cultural diversity and bustling streets, New York is a place that offers something for everyone. We take you there where young South Africans are making extraordinary contributions. We caught up with Justin Davey, who is making waves in the bustling New York art scene.
New York City, the city that never sleeps. A global metropolis where cultures collide and dreams are made. Among the millions of voices that fills its streets, there is a vibrant community of South Africans who have made the Big Apple their home.
I am the type of South African, I still feel like I belong and I want to give back to it.
I wanted to be part of showing the world what Africa can do.
South Africa will always have that pull and always be a home for me.
I miss the food. Even though we can try to make it here and I cook some pap, it's not the same as South African pap.
New York City is calling my name. It's a city where it's very busy. It keeps you on your toes.
People undermine you, and that's just what it is.
It's the land of opportunity. The city never sleeps, as you can hear.
What does it mean to be a South African in a city that is so far removed from the familiar landscapes of Cape Town, Johannesburg, or Durban? What does it take to carve out a life in a city so different, yet so full of possibilities? I set out to speak to some South Africans who have made this city their home. When he was a young boy growing up in Kuils River, Cape Town, Justin Davey says he always knew he wanted to be an artist, but never dreamed that his art would one day really bring him to New York City.
I also recently found out, my father told me that I drew a picture of myself with very tall buildings, and I told myself that I would be in New York one day. And I only realized that recently, after moving to New York, that I had put this plan in motion almost 30 years ago.
After working for the Goodman Gallery in Johannesburg, Justin's wife landed a job in New York. He moved with her, and his Johannesburg bosses thought it a great idea for him to head up what would now become the Goodman Gallery, New York.
In Goodman Gallery's case specifically, it's always been an internationally focused gallery. We've always been looking outward, of course, with South Africa as our base and where most of our artists come from. The gallery was started in 1966 by Linda Givon, who later became Goodman. And it's always had this ethos of looking outwards and bringing everybody in across the cultural spectrum. It was a bastion of open and honest conversations around art during the apartheid era. It was a pioneer in showing artists of different colors in the same exhibition when that was often illegal or could get one in jail. And so there's a legacy with the gallery that I'm just participating in the last few years. I'm just continuing that, bringing that to New York.
New York City is not just home to world-renowned museums. It's also a hub for contemporary art galleries where emerging artists, groundbreaking exhibitions, and creative innovation come together to shape the future of the art world. The Goodman Gallery is one of around 1,400 galleries across the city.
We've had about 10 exhibitions, some of them group shows, some of them solo shows.
Okay. And have they mostly been South African or African artists?
Mostly South African and African, yeah. So we represent African artists and from the diaspora, but also artists from the global south.
Okay. And what is the sort of like the uptake been in New York, especially with South African art?
It's been a little bit slow. We often find that there's a lot of education that needs to happen. People have a certain idea of what African art is, and we're here to kind of bust that image and show them what's really happening in terms of the art world in South Africa.
On the day we visited the gallery, they were showcasing the works of the late Ghanaian-born artist and art historian Atta Kwame. His colorful works of vibrant geometric patterns are inspired by a wide range of influences, Justin tells me, showcasing the tradition of mural paintings and the design of street kiosks along the roads of West African towns.
He kind of pioneered a form of abstraction inspired by the landscape and the environment around him in Ghana. So a lot of what you see, the kind of the geometric abstraction, comes from a lot of the architecture and structures around the cities that he lived in. If you see the stripes, a lot of the stripes are related to what he calls kiosks. Okay. So if you think in the South African context, we call them spaza shops on the side of the road or in neighborhoods that are often makeshift structures, often with zinc, corrugated zinc, and other kinds of materials that are used. And so he is inspired by these materials, which, you know, in many ways are geometrically abstracted, but not in a kind of Western sense.
While talking art with Justin Davey, one cannot escape asking him about home and what he misses the most about South Africa.
I get emotional sometimes thinking of home. Of course, I miss South Africa as a place with a multitude of places and cultures and languages. I have different strategies of keeping myself connected to home. I have a young daughter and I sing Nkosi Sikelele as a lullaby every night to her, and she now knows the words. So that's one way I keep myself and her connected to back home. But I think if I had to sum it up in one word or one sentence, I think it would be resilience. You know, we have all across the cultural spectrum, we've gone through a lot as a country. We're still kind of finding our feet as a young nation in the family of nations. And I think, you know, we as South Africans have resilience. We bounce back. We are able to find joy and laughter and humor in any situation. Often when I travel and I travel with other South Africans are always the first to know where the party is, where the good music is, where the braai is, the best food is in any location in the world.
And while food is the one thing he misses most, Justin has no immediate intentions of returning to South Africa. He is set to make a name for himself right here in the very competitive New York art scene.